Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on the programme, we'll have a check of all the top stories in the United States, notably growing tensions with Venezuela, efforts to broker peace in Ukraine, and comments made by President Trump about Somalia and Somali immigrants. All of that under discussion. Plus, I'll be speaking to Iraq's former foreign minister about an admin error which saw Hezbollah and the Houthis appear on an official Iraqi list of terror groups. Hello and welcome to the programme. All eyes on the United States. As ever, it is Thursday, so we take a look at all the top headline news stories in the United States. We're going to begin with Venezuela because tensions are simmering between Washington and Caracas. President Donald Trump has threatened land strikes against what he calls Venezuelan drug cartels, all part of his war on drugs. Well, while he weighs those options, the US is under pressure to answer for a sea strike back in September, which has drawn bipartisan scrutiny in Congress. A top US Navy admiral ordered a second strike on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat, killing two people who'd survived the first hit. So the question now is, was that double tap strike necessary and was it legal? Well, President Trump is facing mounting calls to release a video of the second strike. He says he has no problem doing so. Well, President Trump is locking horns with President Maduro for two main reasons. Firstly, he accuses the Venezuelan leader of running a major drug cartel. Secondly, he blames Maduro for the surge in Venezuelan migrants, alleging that he is emptying prisons and insane asylums and sending inmates to the United States. While President Maduro denies both claims, saying that President Trump is really after Venezuela's oil reserves. Hello and welcome to the programme. All eyes on the United States. As ever, it is Thursday, so we take a look at all the top headline news stories in the United States. We're going to begin with Venezuela because tensions are simmering between Washington and Caracas. President Donald Trump has threatened land strikes against what he calls Venezuelan drug cartels, all part of his war on drugs. Well, while he weighs those options, the US is under pressure to answer for a sea strike back in September, which has drawn bipartisan scrutiny in Congress. A top US Navy admiral ordered a second strike on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat, killing two people who'd survived the first hit. So the question now is, was that double tap strike necessary and was it legal? Well, President Trump is facing mounting calls to release a video of the second strike. He says he has no problem doing so. Well, President Trump is locking horns with President Maduro for two main reasons. Firstly, he accuses the Venezuelan leader of running a major drug cartel. Secondly, he blames Maduro for the surge in Venezuelan migrants, alleging that he is emptying prisons and insane asylums and sending inmates to the United States. While President Maduro denies both claims, saying that President Trump is really after Venezuela's oil reserves. Well, I'm joined today by Angie Wong, a Republican strategist from Florida and a regular on our programme. Great to have you with us, Angie. We're also joined today by Joel Rubin, who's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under the former US President Barack Obama. Joel, great to have you with us again as well, because we've spoken before a couple of times. I want to start by talking about what's been happening in the waters around Venezuela. We've had 21 strikes on suspected drug shipments since the 2nd of September. More than 80 people have been killed. Let me ask you, Angie, first of all, what's your understanding of what President Trump is trying to achieve with regards to Venezuela?
Well, certainly after President Trump had a phone call with Maduro, he sent 11 U.S. ships to surround Venezuela, as well as closing down their airspace. A lot of it is posturing because Trump wants Maduro out, and Maduro is just hanging around. At the moment, he's a sitting duck. It looks as if Vladimir Putin, as well as Xi Jinping, has completely left Maduro to hang dry on his own, even though both countries have great interests and business interests in Venezuela. But at the moment, Trump is posturing. He's saying, this is what the American military can do. I'm giving you a window to get out with your families and your loved ones to find safer havens, but you only have a small window. Let's see if Maduro takes it. I think he might. But then again, Maduro's making weird social media videos of him driving around, Caracas and just, partying with his friends. It's a very strange kind of response to President Trump.
Right, and a couple of defiant rallies as well have been taking place there in Caracas. Joel, let me turn to you, and picking up on what Angie's saying there. I mean, is Maduro looking vulnerable? And let's not forget, he sits atop possibly the world's largest oil reserves, 300 billion barrels worth of the stuff.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. And you'll hear me agree with Angie that President Trump is looking for regime change in Venezuela, but that's about all that we'll likely agree on. This would be an unauthorized military invasion of a sovereign state without any congressional approval, without any casus belli, no War Powers Act being invoked either to justify an invasion. And instead, we're sort of doing this secondary strike set against boats in the Caribbean. Now, they're allegedly narco traffickers. First of all, just because they're narco traffickers doesn't mean that we can blow them out of the water. We have rules of the sea, laws of the sea, where we can interdict. But we don't really know. And in fact, some studies say that about a quarter of those boats are likely civilian only, meaning that we've already killed 20 or so individuals who have nothing to do with drug trafficking. And so we're now watching it melt down in Congress. Both sides of the aisle are very upset about what the strikes are creating, and also are worried about possible war crimes violations by the Pentagon in recent strikes in September, where apparently survivors of one strike were then killed in deep violation of the laws of war.
Right, Angie, let's pick up on that. I mean, as Joel says, a lot of the debate at the moment is about whether or not the US military broke the law with that double tap on the suspected vessel in the Caribbean. I mean, what's your thinking here? Was that vulnerable? And is Pete Hegseth looking a bit vulnerable here?
I'm not sure. I mean, all of the military operations went through military and civilian lawyers first, and that is what the Department of War has put out as a statement. Now, I don't know of any operation that only strikes with one missile. So if multiple missiles fire, is that going against international law? I never heard of anything like that. So I think all of that could be litigated. It's been done. And it seems more and more likely to me that the Trump administration is just going to go ahead and do this and then worry about the consequences later. And that's and certainly
under what authorization, though? I have to ask you. I have to ask you. I mean, under what authorization? You know, I served in the Congress as a staffer, and I worked with the Hill extensively at the State Department. And you have to have rules of the road. There is no legal authorization for striking and killing ships at sea and then invading Venezuela proactively without there having been any kind of military engagement prior. What is the rationale? And I don't think the American people, and I don't think President Trump's MAGA base, are very interested in a regime change war, which is what they're getting right now.
Angie?
Well, I think there is some interest there. And again, I think the drug boats, the cocaine boats, we're calling them, I think that's just secondary. That's a nice narrative to sell to everyone to gain public support. But the reality is Trump is trying to cut off the oil pipeline that is financing a lot of the world's conflicts right now. We know that. And we know that many of the world's conflicts and wars also is somehow embedded within the Venezuelan regime. So there has been a lot of support, especially amongst the MAGA crowd, to get rid of this guy. Now, Congress is stepping in, and I'm sure everyone's going to be asking questions, and we'll get it done right. But right now, there's been many
I don't believe that
set
at
off
all.
Even by Obama.
I don't think that's
Joel, let me put this to you, Joel.
It won't just be done right. This needs to be done right now.
Right, but I think you're both going to agree that, you know, I don't think either side of the aisle particularly likes President Nicolas Maduro, but what Joel seems to have issue with is the methods, how we're going to get to the point that Maduro is no longer the president. Is that what you're saying, Joel?
I have deep concerns about Maduro, and for many years have been outspoken in criticizing him and his violations of human rights. The Venezuelan people have suffered inordinately, but you don't just launch a war preemptively based upon a false predicate because you want to. There has to be American support behind it. The American people aren't looking to get into new wars of choice. And I think that President Trump is trying to drag us in that direction. I think that there's no explanation to the American people as to why we should spend our money, our military hardware, and potentially our service members' lives on this conflict.
Okay, Angie, I mean, does it look to you like we're on the brink of war? The world's largest aircraft carrier is hovering around in that part of the world. Does it look like, is this posturing, or are we on the brink of a war? What do you think?
I mean, it's posturing and it's certainly a precursor. When you shut down airspace in Venezuela and around Venezuela, then you're basically giving notice to airmen to this might be a combat zone and things may happen. Now, I don't believe it's going to escalate that much, but then again, even President Trump on Air Force One the other day said, well, let's see what happens here. But there is a good reason for going into Venezuela, and that's for national security. And I think that is well justified with the drug trade and with other things. And that will be explained further with President Trump. I don't want to put words in the administration's mouth, but I think that is a great reason to go in, is because so much of that drug trade comes in through my town in Miami and goes up the I-95 and spreads around the country. So I think these are all good reasonings.
Okay, Joel, a quick wrap up on this one.
To Congress.
All right.
Sell it to Congress and get it approved.
All right, Joel, I'm going to give you the first word on the next topic because we're talking about a new war that might be starting. Let's talk about an old war that doesn't seem to end. And I want to ask you whether you're surprised that Steve Witkoff left Moscow earlier in the week without a deal.
Yeah, I support the diplomacy. I think that we have to have a diplomatic end, and I applaud President Trump's team for trying to find a diplomatic way out of this nightmare. The problem is that they don't have the tools that they need to really force Vladimir Putin to accept the fact that he has to end his invasion of Ukraine. And in fact, now we're hearing that Putin is saying he wants all of Donbass and he'll get it either through military action or some other way, meaning diplomacy. And that means getting territory that he currently doesn't control. So Steve Witkoff, he needs to bring a little more, a stronger hand to the negotiating table, have Europe behind him rather than wondering what he's negotiating, have more military support to Ukraine, support, for example, the president should support extra sanctions on Russia that have almost 90 senators signing onto them already, waiting for those to be passed. There's a lot more tools that we're just not using, and therefore Witkoff comes in with a weak hand at the negotiating table.
Okay, Angie, compromises have not been found. That was the message that came out of Moscow. I mean, do you get a sense that some progress has been made overall?
I'm not really certain. This is round 3, I believe, just from the second Trump administration, where they're trying to bring both Putin and Zelensky to the negotiating table. We're seeing rounds and rounds of this. I'm not sure even if the Trump administration can break this deadlock. Certainly, there's a lot of agreement on the Ukraine side. We thought there was at least some pathway to ending this war with Putin, but we don't really know if we're any closer today. And how long have we been reporting the story, Tom? For several months now. And what we see is, Putin kind of saying, yeah, okay, I'll think about it. And then nothing happens, right? So what's it really, really going to take? And what does Putin actually want? Does he just want Donbass? Does he want the entire southeast region? Does he want the entire, bit of Ukraine? We don't really know. And I think until we actually know what the end game is, right now, Putin's kind of waiting around until maybe the next administration. We don't know, but he's just giving us a lot of words that kind of calms down the Trump administration so they don't, act further military.
Yeah, I agree with Angie. Now, look, we do know what he wants, and he's sort of playing us for fools right now and not taking President Trump seriously. And every time President Trump gets close to taking stronger action on sanctions, for example, Putin calls and calms everybody down. Then the action doesn't happen. And so, yeah, I agree. I think he's playing for time. I think he can keep doing this for 3, 5, 10 more years if he wants to. Right,
and he's got the upper hand on the battlefield at the moment. Just to both of you, really, because I'm curious to know how much of a top news story this is in the United States. Because, I mean, outside the United States, it's a huge story. It's on all the international news channels all the time. What about in America? Do people talk about Ukraine day and night, Angie?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly at the top of the news hour on most nights. We just expect movement, but what we're seeing is just a lot of meetings happening, a lot of delegations coming here to Florida, and a lot of just meetings and things like that, but no real movement. And I think we really do need to get Putin to the table and have some sort of real negotiations. The U.S. can only do so much. We can facilitate, we can represent both parties if they wanted to, but it really has to come down to these two leaders leaders and having them agree on something. Again, we could be the facilitators. We certainly, after seeing some of the news stories coming out here, we do want to do a deal. There's going to be a lot of redevelopment deals happening in Ukraine. And, I'm sure Witkoff wants a part of that. And I'm sure the Trump administration and the family even wants a piece of that as well. But we're not any closer. And it doesn't, we talk about 19-point plans and this, that, and the other. It just never really seems to stick.
Okay, let's move on to our next topic. Both of you, let's listen to what President Trump's been saying. He's made it clear that he doesn't want Somali immigrants in the United States, telling reporters that people from Somalia should go back to where they come from. And he called the Somali American Congresswoman Ilhan Omar garbage. Let's take a listen to what he said.
But when I watch what is happening in Minnesota, Somalians ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country is no good for a reason. Their country stinks. And we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain.
Okay, Joel, I don't know if you could hear all the audio there. What do you make of this, and why do you think Somalia and Somali people are all of a sudden on President Trump's radar?
Well, it's because they're Black. And because they're African immigrants, a community that has always been in his gun sight, so to speak. Look, those were hateful, racist words. Today, Somalis. Tomorrow, the other day was Mexicans. It was Haitians during the campaign. It could be Jews. I'm a Jewish American. The hate target doesn't really stop, and it's the kind of language that we should not have our elected leaders be using ever. And I think there is, and the one nugget of substance of concern, there's a corruption scandal in Minnesota that largely came out of Somali American and Somali entities, people, individuals. They're being prosecuted. It's horrible. But it's not as if these are the only people in the United States committing crimes. Every single time a crime is committed by someone, should we blast their entire ethnic group and call them racist names and garbage and they should leave? No, we should not. And I just really wish that the president would stick to the facts rather than just attack people incessantly like he did at that meeting.
Right, and there's been some reaction, hasn't there, to this? I mean, people calling this kind of rhetoric dangerous, reckless, some of the words doing the rounds. I mean, Angie, what do you make of this?
Well, I think the leftist media is making it a racist thing. I don't see this as a race, skin color, even an economic issue.
Calling people garbage is acceptable? Really? You're okay with that?
I don't think he's a racist. And look, I support.
Do you think that someone should call? Do you think an elected? I'm sorry, no. As an American Jew, I know the Holocaust history very well, and I know how Jews were described in the 1930s in Nazi Germany as garbage and as rats and other dehumanizing terms. That is not acceptable. Okay. Do you believe that we should use dehumanizing terms?
Angie?
Look, I know President Trump and myself were both from Queens, New York, which is the melting pot of the United States. In my own classroom, we have 46 different languages being spoken.
My grandmother was from Queens. My grandmother was from Queens. She wasn't a racist.
I do think
she was from Queens. Just because you're from Queens doesn't mean you're a racist.
Okay, let Angie make a point. Let Angie make a point.
Look, I think I think that if billions of dollars through fraud was used under Tim Walz's watch, I think that should be investigated. And
That's
it doesn't
legitimate.
matter who's. Oh, it doesn't matter who the community is. I don't care what your last name is. It doesn't matter. There was fraud that was possibly committed, and it should be investigated. And I agree with you. I think there should have been some choice words by the president. He's almost 80 years old. He doesn't care about being politically correct. He never has been. And I think that's what we want. That's what the American people elected last year. We want someone who's just
that's not what the American people want.
The rhetoric
they don't want their leaders calling other people garbage. They don't want people being called
listen,
garbage.
we're in politics. We've been called way worse than garbage, right? So if you can't take it, you got to grow some Teflon skin here. Garbage is like the
That's
least
different
offensive
between
thing I've been
politicians
called.
and Ilhan Omar versus a community of people who live in the part of the country.
All right, let's just move
Yeah,
on to
and-
let's move on to our next topic, because we haven't got much time left. We've only got 2 or 3 minutes, and I wanted to get on to this because Angie brought up President Trump's age just there. He's pushing 80, isn't he? He has looked a little bit sleepy in a couple of meetings. Well, that's what's been reported in the press, appearing to doze off, some have said. But we're told he is in excellent overall health. He's had an MRI. Joel, what do we know?
Well, we don't know anything really. I've had MRIs. I'm sure many Americans have. And I knew where the MRI was focused, on my back, for instance. The president, when asked, said he didn't really know what it was about, what it was for. So he's clearly not interested in sharing that information with the American people. And I think that we should all wonder about his health. Personally, I don't complain about him dozing at a cabinet meeting. A lot of those are snore fest. Look at it. But nonetheless, he really needs to be clear about his health. He made it a big issue about Joe Biden in the last election. He should live up to the standards he set.
Angie, are we getting full transparency on President Trump's health?
I think President Trump, since he's gotten into office in January, has been doing a marathon every single day. We've seen more movement geopolitically and domestically in the last 11 months than we've seen in the last 11 years. So this guy, he's been running. He might be a little bit run down. It's the end of the year. I think he's getting up there in age. Let him do what he needs to do. Let his deputies do what they need to do. And if he has to take a break, let him take a break. But honestly, this guy is a machine. He is not going to stop. And even with his health, I mean, his doctor had put out a clean bill of health the other day. Concern for the president's health only because he's working.
Okay, we have a little bit of an audio issue there, but it's well timed because we're out of time. And it certainly has, Angie, been a very busy year for President Trump. Plenty happening. So you had the last word, although we didn't quite hear it. Angie Wong, Republican strategist, thank you very much indeed to you. And thanks as well to Joel Rubin. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Now, turning our attention to the Middle East. The United States has opened up a new 50-acre consulate in Erbil, which is the capital of Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan region. Or officials say the new facility is a visible sign of America's long-term partnership with both Iraq and the Kurdish region. Well, we're joined now by Hoshiar Zibari, who is an Iraqi Kurdish politician who served as Deputy Prime Minister, former Foreign Minister and former Minister of Finance. Mr. Zibari, thank you very much for joining us on Arabiya English. I would like to start by asking you about a story.
Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. There's a story that's caused quite a lot of confusion in Iraq and beyond because Hezbollah and the Houthis have both found themselves on an official list of terrorist organizations. Can we be sure this was an error?
Well, Tom, thank you for having me on your program on Arabiya English. In fact, this was a big embarrassment to the government because the official Iraqi Gazette is the official document of the Iraqi government, the parliament, all the major decisions. That's a record. And this has been going on, this investigation, for years, I would say, not months. And since last November, actually, the commission that was assigned to identify or freeze the assets of the terrorist groups have made a list of names, including Hezbollah and the Houthi. And it was published publicly. And only today the government realized that there has been a mistake. But really, I think it was a political embarrassment for the government. And they tried through the Central Bank of Iraq to correct that error, as they said, to remove them again from the Gazette. But this shows really the working of the government, the caretaking government at the moment after the election, is very chaotic. And honestly, it raised many eyebrows about the efficiency of our government.
Okay, Mr. Zibari, we're saying this is an administrative error. That seems to be the official line as well. But let's talk about what that error signifies, because we're talking here about two organizations, Hezbollah and the Houthis, that are real pillars of Tehran's regional influence. And it's exactly what Washington would have loved to see those two on Iraq's list of terror organizations, no doubt. What is stopping Iraq from turning the page and turning their back on Iranian influence?
Well, it shows the influence very clearly and transparently. And also the government is heavily influenced by armed militias, by PMF, by those who are aligned with them. They host their offices in Baghdad. They support them materially, financially, politically. But honestly, it shows the bias of the government looking at these groups. And I think the original government commission has done their professional work to identify or to freeze the assets of these terrorists who were involved in terrorist actions. But lately, the government realized that these should not be included in the list because of the ideological alliances with each other. So they issued an order, you see, to change the list or to remove it. By law, they have to issue another legislation to change the official Gazette record, but they did it unilaterally. So honestly, it was a mess up. It was great confusion, erratic decisions. I mean, these decisions that are published in the official Gazette has to be considered legally, politically, structurally, because the word is final. It's the law of the land after it's being published in Al-Waqaya Al-Iraqiyya or the official Iraqi events magazine. So really it shows you a great deal of confusion, unfortunately.
All right, and you're giving us the impression that you believe there is considerable Iranian involvement in Iraqi affairs. And I'd like to ask your opinion. How do you think Iraq's leadership should balance relationships with Washington on the one hand, Tehran on the other? Does it have to choose, or can it have both?
Well, first and foremost, Iraq has to act or to behave as a sovereign, independent government. And it takes Iraqi interest as a first priority, and not to look over its shoulder left or right. Yes, there is Iranian influence for historical, cultural, geographical, regional, so nobody is against undermining Iraq relations with Iran. The United States also is an effective international factor. It has a history, a legacy in Iraq, and also it is a major actor actually in the region. So how to balance your act between these two contending competitors on Iraq would depend on an independent, sovereign, nationalist Iraqi leaders that really sometimes it should act according to its own interest, not to look for excuses or to be biased to one side against the other. This is Iraq's dilemma, unfortunately. Iraq's foreign policy dilemma also, how to act as a sovereign state, an independent, credible state in the region, in the world. And on the other hand, it has so many non-state actors who are influencing the direction of its policy.
Right, and you're making it sound a bit like the case in Lebanon, where the Trump administration has made these demands.
Well, there
of
are
the leadership.
similarities.
Right.
There are similarities.
Tell us about that.
There are similarities, but the situation in Iraq is much deeper. You have one Hezbollah in Lebanon. You have dozens of Hezbollah in Iraq.
And President Trump's special envoy for Syria, Tom Burges, was in Baghdad at the weekend. I mean, he brought quite a lot of messages with him. And according to reports, one of the things he said was that there was going to be a new and imminent IDF, so Israeli operation against Hezbollah. And I'm wondering if he's telling his hosts in Baghdad that to try to change their calculations with regards to their relationship with Iran and groups like Hezbollah.
Well, there is a great deal of goodwill toward Iraqi government by the Gulf state, by the Arab countries, its neighbors, the international community, the United States, really to keep Iraq out of the regional escalations or conflict. And the Iraqi government, to its credit, I think, has done some good work recently to keep the country away from Israeli-Iranian conflict or confrontations, or not to be indulged in this regional conflict. But there are times that you have to make decisions. Where do you stand? What is the best interest of yours? The visits of Tom Burges, who is the envoy, the ambassador to Turkey, and the envoy of President Trump to Syria and Lebanon, I think was very significant to carry this message personally to the Iraqi leadership, to stay away from Hezbollah in Lebanon in terms of financing whatsoever, not to be involved in any regional escalation. If you do, then the United States has its options. It may lift its embargo or its veto on the Israelis not to attack the PMF. This is what we heard from the media personally. We are not at those meetings, but I think his message was loud and clear that Iraq should be neutral, should look after itself, should expedite its work to form its new government after the elections, and not to be involved in any foreign adventures.
Right, and Tom Burges was very clear about that. He said that if Iraqi factions, and we can assume he's talking about groups that might be sympathetic to Hezbollah, if any of those groups in Iraq interfere in any way in supporting Hezbollah, then they will be attacked. That would mean Iraq comes under attack from the United States. How seriously do you think the administration in Baghdad takes a warning like that?
I think the administration is very serious. As you know, President Trump has this peace plan for Gaza. He has invested a great deal of work, of time. And really, they don't want this process to be derailed, or the focus should be turned into other issues. And Iraqi rule really should be neutral here, should not be engaged or involved for further escalation. I think the timing of his visit, don't forget that President Trump has a special envoy now to Iraq, Mark Savaya, who has not come yet, but to send Tom Burges to Baghdad and to deliver this message means the issue is very serious. It depends on some hard intelligence. There may be such moves by some uncontrolled militias, you see, to put themselves in the new fray that it's emerging.
I mean, there are so many examples from the last 12 months in the world of geopolitics. that make me question why Iraq would want to maintain strong ties with Iran. Look at what happened to Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Look at what happened to Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. Look at what happened to the Houthis. And look at the dire economic situation in Iran. And you turn on the tap in Tehran, and water might or might not come out of that tap. And I'm wondering myself, what's the attraction of staying aligned to Iran? And given the very likely issue of confronting the Trump administration, which would be a mistake, wouldn't it?
Well, really, I'm not in the government, Tom, anymore, so as an analyst, I can speak. You should ask this question to the Prime Minister or some government ministers. But I think the connection is more ideological, religious, sectarian, for this association. Iran is a very important country. It's a strong neighbor of Iraq. Historically, we have a legacy of conflict, of wars, of relations. The longest border, the Shia in Iraq have close intimacy and connection. There are cultural, social connection. But Iraq should act again as an independent, sovereign country to look after the interests of its people first, and also to deal with the international community, with its neighbor, based on mutual respect, mutual interest. So really, if I couldn't answer your question, I may refer you to some government officials, you see, to speak why this reliance or dependence on Iran.
Let me ask you, Mr. Zibari, about some events a bit closer to where you are now in Erbil, because last week there was a drone attack on the Khor gas field, which is in the Kurdish region of Iraq. Who is believed to have been behind that?
Yes, that was a very, very serious attack on our infrastructure, on our gas and oil security. This was one of the largest gas fields in Iraq, and it was supplying gas for electricity for the entire region, and not only for Iraqi Kurdistan, which the government have succeeded in implementing a program of electrification of 24 hours for every household. And also it's providing electricity to Iraqi provinces, to Mosul, to Tikrit, to Diyala. So this attack on this gas field, which is run by one of the Emirati companies, was a real threat to the very existence of the development or the progress in the region. I think many people, maybe in the south or the government failures, felt jealous about this progress and they want to stop it. But it has definitely some ramification, regional, internal. The government assigned a commission to investigate by the Interior Minister, the Chief of Intelligence, the Interior Minister of Kurdistan. And I saw their report today. It was very disappointing. They failed to name the culprits, the perpetrators. They gave some general indication where these drones or rockets have come from, but they failed, in fact, to find out or to identify the perpetrators of this attack. And this is the 11th attack on that field. In fact, it wasn't the first, but it was serious because they did good homework to target the condensed storages of the gas. And we, following that, we asked our allies, the international community, the United States, to help us to provide some anti-drones, anti-rocket security system for our critical infrastructure. I hope they would respond positively because this really undermines investment, prosperity, which everybody calls for in the region nowadays. This is a direct challenge to that philosophy or policy that many countries pursue.
Okay, the United States has said it's going to open, well, it is opening a large consulate in Erbil, an enormous piece of real estate. And I'm wondering whether that provides your region with an added sense of reassurance. What are your thoughts?
I attended the opening of the consulate yesterday. There was a big ceremony, and in fact, it was very impressive. It was one of the largest consulates, not only in the region, but maybe in the world. That was a sign of U.S. commitment for security, for continued presence in the region, and the shared value between the Kurdistan region people and the United States. I think they have made an excellent investment. Over 100 million were invested in that building. But it is a testimony to the close friendship between the people of Kurdistan and the United States. So it was very emotional, to be honest with you. And we toured the compound. It was very impressive in terms of architecture, of security, of the space. And we were very pleased that this has been ongoing process of building this consulate since 2018, but it stands as a symbol of friendship.
As we bring our conversation to a conclusion, you mentioned a little earlier on President Trump's envoy to Iraq, Mark Savaya. One of the things he said on Twitter in the last few hours, he said Iraq could play an influential role in the region if it can shake off these unofficial powers that operate in the country. He's talking about the Iranian groups we're talking about. He says Iraq stands at a critical crossroads. And I want to ask you, Mr. Zibari, which way do you think Iraq is going to turn?
Well, I think Mark Savaya has been very straight, very honest, and expressing or representing the policy of President Trump, of the new administration. He hasn't resumed his duties yet. He has been on unofficial visits to Iraq, but we expect him to visit the country soon and to convey his messages directly to the Iraqi leaders. This is a very important development. It shows that the president himself is paying more attention to Iraq. I, as a former foreign minister, the longest serving foreign minister, I understand that Iraq can play a far more important role in regional security and stability, and a partner with its Gulf neighbors, with its neighbor, with the international community, provided it follow a sovereign, independent, Iraqi nationalist policy toward the international community. And what Mark Savaya highlighted is really the foreign influence, the presence of non-state actors who are directing the policies, the foreign policies, who are obstructing progress. I think he has identified the core reason for Iraqi regress in playing that regional role.
Okay, and just lastly, one very quick final question I wanted to ask you. The Iraqi Prime Minister, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, has nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Has that generated lots of discussion in Iraq?
Well, it has generated a great deal of discussion and criticism of Sudani. The timing couldn't have been worse for him. He's a nominee for a prime minister for a second term. And this would be used by his rivals or his competitors. How could you do that? And President Trump was the person who killed our leader, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis or General Qasim Soleimani. So I think they will beat him with that stick for his second term. Although President Trump has an open ambition to be the Nobel Peace Prize next year, and many countries have supported him, and Iraq, as a normal country, also could have supported his bid. But I think this is played into Iraqi politics to undermine his chances.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for being so generous with your time. Hoshiar Zibari.
Most welcome,
Thank
Tom.
you very much. Sir.
Most welcome. Most welcome. Most welcome.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for a look back at some of the best interviews of the week. Until then, goodbye.